Breaking news in the so-called House of Horrors case out of Ohio. The parents of 16 children indicted for alleged sex crimes against children. And they're not the only ones facing charges. I'll explain.
They went looking for a DNA swab.
These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse. Law enforcement sought the DNA of Cers Jr. related to the child sex abuse case. Once Cers Jr. was located, search warrants were executed to secure his DNA for genetic testing. Upon serving the search warrants for the child sex abuse case, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Omar Street house became known. The child sex abuse cases involve intra-family relations and do not pose a risk to the general public, and I would also add, does not involve human trafficking. This case all started with diligent Dollar General clerks calling authorities with concerns over children they observed. We asked the public to be mindful of the circumstances around them, especially involving children. We continue to ask for the public's respect for the rights and privacy of the child victims in this case. I'd like to add a thank you to the Vinton County Sheriff's Office and BCI for their investigative efforts, which have been amazing. This case is going to be prosecuted by myself, Kara Keating, Assistant Attorney General, and Annika Collins, Highland County Prosecuting Attorney. Thank you.
That's it, a cotton swab from inside Cers Jr.'s cheek. But when state agents served that search warrant on June 30th at the house on Omar Street in rural Ohio, they found something else. 16 children. 16 kids living in conditions that made grown investigators stop and take a breath. And you already know what I'm about to say. This didn't begin with some elite task force or a federal raid. It began because a few Dollar General clerks saw something wrong and decided to call it in. Cers Jr. and his wife Elizabeth were taken into custody that day. Cers Senior and Christina Cers, the grandparents, were arrested too. At first, all four were charged with 16 counts of child endangering. They entered not guilty pleas. But now the grand jury has gone further. Cers Jr. and Elizabeth each face 4 felony charges. 2 counts of sexual battery.
Well, that was somewhat telegraphed, as we talked about the other day, by a statement of the prosecutor from Vinton County in opposing reduction of bond for Elizabeth. And so we knew something was coming. What seems surprising about this, and it is really unclear as to who the alleged victims are, it looks like the indictment or charges against the 2 siders go back to 2022, the first quarter of 2022, against unnamed victims, but they were related to the investigation of the other 2 people indicted on sex offenses today. Curiously enough, the press release indicates that the victims were not a member of the immediate family of the siders, but at the same time, the statement given by the county prosecutor would seem that perhaps they were. So that's something that you and others are going to have to dig into and clarify.
2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, and the grandparents face their own stack, felonies and misdemeanors for endangering children. But here's the thing though, the deeper you pull at this case, the more it splits as something the system doesn't want you to sit with. Those Dollar General employees are the real heroes in this story. Not the sheriff, not the prosecutor. The minimum wage workers who saw a child and refused to pretend they didn't, and the system has already tried to silence them.
So the sheriff said that this investigation is ongoing. And we know from the Vinton County prosecutor telling the commissioners we're seeking permanent custody of the children, that's going to happen, and they will more than likely be successful in obtaining permanent custody of the children, especially if there's a conviction on a sex crime. So I'm thinking to myself, if this investigation is ongoing, is there going to be more there? Are we going to see potentially more indictments?
Well, at least if they thought they had enough on inter-family sexual misconduct, I would have included it in the indictment today. And so either they don't have enough because it wasn't going on inside the family home, or the children are still in the process of being interviewed, going through social workers and psychological treatment and testing, and they may not want to proceed at this point. They can always, as you know, produce a superseding indictment with new charges, new victims after they're arraigned on this indictment and while it's pending.
When a reporter went down to that store, the employee said, "I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. I can't talk to you." Corporate had come down on them. Big chain policy. You have to go through media relations. But we all know what that means. It means the people who actually saw what was happening were told to shut up. That's not an accident. Not an accident at all. Now here's where it gets interesting. Prosecutor William Archer stood in front of the cameras and said these cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse.
A Vinton County grand jury today has issued indictments in 3 criminal cases involving sexual abuse and child endangerment. These charges stem from criminal investigations conducted by the Vinton County Sheriff's Office and the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations, BCI. The cases are being prosecuted by the Vinton County Prosecutor's Office with the assistance from the Highland County Prosecutor's Office and the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit. In December of 2025, at the request of the Vinton County Sheriff's Office, BCI's Special Victims Unit opened an investigation into allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. Information obtained in this investigation prompted BCI in March of 26 to open a second investigation, this one involving allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. On June 30th, authorities executed a search warrant at a residence in Hamden, Ohio, and Vinton County on Omar Street. There have been a lot of speculation and questions regarding the June 30th presence on Omar Street in Hamden. These indictments provide some insight into the ongoing investigation. However, to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation and to protect the victims, I conclude my statement here. I am thankful for the work of my deputies and our fellow partners at BCI. We will continue to pursue justice in these cases.
Law enforcement sought the DNA of Gary Cers Jr. related to the child sex abuse case. Once he was located, search warrants were executed to secure that DNA for genetic testing. And while serving those warrants, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Omar Street house became known. But read that carefully. They didn't go to that house because of the kids. They went because of a DNA order in a sex crimes case. The children were almost a secondary discovery. That should shake you. Here's the contradiction, though.
Yeah, we're digging into that for sure and clarifying. And I want to read what the press release says. It says the indictment alleges that between January and September 2022, the defendants engaged in sexual conduct with a minor more than 10 years younger than their own age. The victim is not a member of their immediate family. So it said, he said, this says not a member of the immediate family. However, the prosecutor said this was an intra-family thing. So are we left to believe it's not their own children, but potentially, another child in the family?
The press release says the victim in the sex crimes case was not a member of their immediate family.
And at least since the 2 investigations were tied, the ones for which the indictment on the sex offenses against the Cers today arose from the investigation of the other 2 men indicted in the case. It may be that the same victims are involved, and that in the course of the first investigation, the victims relayed that the Cers also were involved either with the knowledge of the 2 other men and also indicted today, or whether or not they was a follow-up.
And I've learned that investigation 1, which involves Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson, this is investigation 1 that it began in December of 2025. The information about Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers was developed from that investigation. So that is what led the law enforcement officers initially to that house on June 30th. People were saying, oh, it's because they went there for a public indecency warrant for Gary Jr. I think you and I knew the whole time, and I've been saying the whole time, no, they didn't go there with a search warrant for a public indecency case. This was going to be much more serious.
Yeah, and I think we both kind of concluded that at the time, based on the conduct of the investigators. You don't have the Ohio Attorney General down in Vinton County for a warrant on a exposing case. And it's interesting how that exposing case may tie in with these subsequent charges. The only thing I can try and extrapolate from this is either the two men that are charged in the case as well are providing information to the prosecutor and the attorney general that led them to the ciders, or alternatively, the victims in that case provided information that the two men not only perped on them, but that the ciders were involved in sexual misconduct with them. Either of those options would tell me is likely as to how they got on the doorstep of the ciders with the search warrant this summer.
Not their own child. But the prosecutor said the child sex abuse cases involve intrafamily relations. Actually, let me rephrase that. He said the cases involve intrafamily relations and do not pose a risk to the general public. So which is it? The victim wasn't immediate family, but the case is intrafamily. Are we supposed to believe this was some distant relative and nobody else around them knew? You know, just like I know that math doesn't add up. And don't forget about Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson. Those two men were indicted in a separate but connected case. The investigation that started in December of 2025. Former Franklin County Prosecutor Ron O'Brien broke it down.
And, we still have pieces of this puzzle that we are assembling. One thing that really piqued my interest was that William Archer, the Vinton County prosecutor, said that alert Dollar General employees contacted law enforcement about their concerns about some of the children that they saw with Gary Jr. and Elizabeth Cers. They were very concerned. And so it seems like potentially we may have had a couple of different things going on here. We have Dollar General employees, and then we also have this investigation one where information is gathered and gleaned about the couple. And all of that was enough to potentially get this search warrant for the house on June 30th.
Yes, and at least it's probably the addition of all that kind of information, potentially from co-defendants, victims on the first case, and the children may have said something at the Dollar General to an employee there that piqued their interest and passed it on to law enforcement, and then they were already looking into the matters the other two men and the ciders had been involved in going back. That's 4 years that the alleged misconduct in that case is alleged to occurred.
What's very interesting to me about this, Ron, I went down to Vinton County, and employees at the Dollar General said to me, I'm really sorry. I can't talk to you. I can't talk to you. And I thought maybe it was a corporate thing. Corporate came down on them and said, no, we don't do that. Because a lot of times when you're dealing with these big chains, you have to go through, the corporate media relations office and things of that nature. And now I'm wondering, were these the people that potentially called in to law enforcement?
And that well could be the case. And the law enforcement personnel would have told them not to talk to anybody such as yourself or others.
He said either those two men gave up the Cers couple or the victims in that first case told investigators that Gary Jr. and Elizabeth were involved too. Either way, this did not start with a public indecency warrant like people first tried to claim. You and I both knew that. You don't send the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit into a county just for some exposure case. That never made sense. And it still doesn't. The Vinton County Sheriff, Ryan Kane, said the grand jury issued indictments in 3 criminal cases involving sexual abuse and child endangerment. 3 cases, one from December 2025, one from March 2026, and the one that exploded on June 30th, all tied together. That's not a coincidence, that's a pattern. The sex crimes against Gary Jr. and Elizabeth are said to go back to January 3rd or September of 2022, more than 4 years ago. Let that sink in. 4 years, and what did the local system do? Nothing visible. Not until the Dollar General clerks made that call. That call is the only reason we're talking about this right now. Not a neighbor. Not a teacher. Not a caseworker. A store clerk. Prosecutor Archer called those clerks diligent. He used that word. Because he knows without them, this case might still be buried. This is the part nobody talks about. The grandparents, Gary Sr. and Christina Cers, are not charged with any sex crimes. Not one. They're charged with endangering children. Some felonies, some misdemeanors. Gary Sr. is 73 years old. out on a signature bond wearing a GPS bracelet because of serious medical issues. The prosecutor said he's not a threat to the public. But if you lived in that house or had access to it, and 16 children were there in that condition, how do you not see? That's the question the system doesn't want you to ask. And look, I need to slow down here for a second. I want to speak directly to you, just for a moment. 16 children, we keep saying that number, and it becomes almost abstract. But each one of those kids is a person, a child who had to be seen by a Dollar General clerk to be noticed. That sits wrong with me. It should sit wrong with you too. The people paid to protect them didn't find them first. The neighbors didn't raise enough hell. A clerk making $12 an hour did. Let that sit. Now here's where the bigger picture locks in. The county prosecutor says they're seeking permanent custody of those children. Good. But then he asks the public to respect the privacy of the child victims. Respect privacy. That's the line they always use when they want you to stop looking. Because if you look too closely, you'll start asking why this investigation is still ongoing. Why the sheriff said he had to conclude his statement to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation. Ongoing means not finished. It means there could be more indictments, more victims, more adults who knew. Ron O'Brien said something I can't shake.
Ron, let's move on now to the elder Cers. Gary Cers Senior is 73 years old. He's out on a signature bond wearing a GPS bracelet. When he was released on that signature bond because of his serious medical issues, the Vinton County prosecutor said, look, he's not a threat to the public. But he and his wife, Christina, the grandparents, have now been indicted. They're facing 2 counts of child endangering felonies in the 2nd degree, 10 counts of endangering children, felonies of the 3rd degree, and then 7 counts of endangering children. Those are misdemeanors. They are not charged with any sex crimes. So how do you see their cases ending up? Because, I mean, they're challenging their competency, or at least their lawyers are saying they may not be competent to stand trial. However, they have not been charged with any sex crimes.
Yes, it's interesting that the elder Cers were not indicted on any sex offenses, either within the family or outside the family. They are just facing the multiple endangering children charges that range from a misdemeanor up to the 2nd degree felony. So what we can conclude from that is apparently they don't have enough evidence now to proceed on sex offenses inside that home, or alternatively, they never occurred.
He said if prosecutors thought they had enough on intrafamily sexual misconduct inside that home, they would have included it in the indictment today. So either they don't have enough yet, or it didn't happen inside that home. Those are 2 very different realities, and the reason for that, well, you'll see. The children are still being interviewed, social workers, psychological treatment, testing. They can always file a sue proceeding indictment with new charges and new victims. That means this case isn't close to over. They're just pacing it. They're building it piece by piece while we watch and wait. So now you're left with this. Dollar General clerks were the only ones paying attention. The grandparents are charged with endangering, not sex crimes. The parents face sex crime charges involving a minor who wasn't their immediate child, and the investigation is still open. Still breathing, still gathering names. What do you think those clerks saw in that store that made them so afraid they had to call law enforcement? And why did corporate tell them to stay silent? I want to hear your answer in the comments, because I don't think this is over. Not by a long shot.